Troglodyte warning. Today I want to break down a clip from Lee Anderson's broadcast last night. Bless him, he was given the graveyard shift of Christmas Day. They could have given him a day off. God bless the fella. Where he talks about is working class culture being erased from the public eye? We've been silenced and quietened down. So let's get straight into the video.
Welcome back to Lee Anderson's Real World. I've got Andy Twelves, he's back, and Dr. Lisa McKenzie, the self-proclaimed anarchist. Guys, we're from this neck of the woods, Mansfield, Ashfield. We've got a certain history, heritage and culture which I'm incredibly proud of. We might say things a little bit different here, but I think we've got big hearts. But I think, Lisa, that slowly but surely our sort of culture in this neck of the woods is being eradicated, being taken away from us, and sometimes we're criticised for it.
I agree. We are criticised, especially for our humour, because it can be quite coarse.
I'd want to know who's taken this culture away from him. Who is this, bad guy taking the culture away from? Because all I can see is that these kind of towns have been deindustrialised by Margaret Thatcher. So she was the main source of taking people's communities, culture, working class pride in their skilled jobs. Will he talk about that?
And people don't always realise that we're being friendly when we're being funny.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that our culture is being eroded, not here. Because whenever I'm in Ashfield with my family and all my old friends,
He doesn't like that.
seems like nothing's changed for us. We still, we still have a laugh. We still are quite coarse. We still laugh at each other.
Yeah, but that's a family thing. That's a close family thing.
But I'm not sure. I feel that our culture is being lost. I think that it's being added to, and I don't see that as a bad thing. But no, I don't think our culture is being. I mean, obviously,
That's a subtle distinction because for Lee Anderson, it's been taken away. And that's, I think, a racist thing. That's where when we talk about racism, like somehow you need a pure culture. Whereas culture's never been pure. It's always been, added on by different cultures coming in. It's always been a mismatch of random kind of different traditions and histories. So seeing it as an addition, you're adding to it. Again, it's reeks of kind of weakness that somehow by other cultures coming in, it's like, oh, we're losing our culture. I mean, how weak is your culture if somehow another culture comes in and you're challenged by it? I think that shows a kind of weakness. And I think it comes from a real place because we have lost working class culture has been diminished since the 1980s. So in some ways, yeah, he's right, but not in the way he thinks he is by immigrants coming in. It's usually the big businesses and Thatcherism that has killed this country.
we have lost a lot in these areas. The culture of the coal mines and the factories. The things that we did around those, that has definitely gone. We have lost that.
But I'm thinking more of the language you use, the humour. You said coarse.
Yeah, see, he doesn't want to talk about that. Reform don't want to talk about that because they're not bringing jobs back. They don't care. Farage was a massive Thatcherite, so he doesn't care about the working class. And it's interesting that Lee Anderson used to be working class. He used to be a Labour supporter. He was a Labour MP, and then he was a Tory MP, and now he's a Reform UK. So his just shows you he has a complete lack of integrity and principles. He politically has no, consistency or let's say integrity. He'll just go wherever the money is. So the idea that, let's talk about Thatcherism. No, they never want to talk about it because that's where a lot of people's concern and kind of poverty, inequality, that's where a lot of the problems actually come from. And it's not been addressed.
Sometimes, of course, especially now, Andy, we live in a social media age when we may say something around this table having a few pints, but if you put that on social media, you'd get cancelled, kicked off, and probably lose your job.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's context. That's a public forum. When you're talking privately with friends, you know that if you say something a bit thingy, we all do. I'm sorry, we all do. I don't care who you are, what class you are. You'll say something which is obviously ironic, humor, unless you're racist, and that's a different thing. But if you're saying something obviously ironically, that would be appreciated. But in the context of social media or the workplace, that's not always clear. If you say something ironically, that isn't always translatable. So, yes, especially in these times where people are, you know, Lee Anderson are saying things that are, you know, anti immigrant, anti trans, yeah, there is that potential offense. So, it's all about context. Humor has always been about context. Again, a stand up comedian saying some funny stuff on a stage, or someone, you know, having a rant or scree on Twitter, very different.
True.
I agree. I mean, I live in London now, and I've
Is it a
been.
posh part of London?
Well, it's an all right bit of London. We could be worse.
Not
could be
bad for a
worse.
socialist.
Well, you know, champagne.
It's interesting that Lee says that he is in the top 10% of earners. He's earning at least 90k a year. He's not working class at all. He's turned his back on the working class. He doesn't care about the working class. He's a very wealthy man, and it's interesting for him to talk about, oh, London.
Champagne and prosecco, I'd say, but I mean, it's London, so it's posh. But I've been back here this week for Christmas, and been out with a couple of friends that I used to work with, used to go to school with, and it's so refreshing to come back, and I'm able to be slightly blunt, a bit coarse, like you said, and you can actually be. You're not walking on eggshells like you would be in kind of corporate London, and I think this kind of not HRification of the world, but where you've really got to watch everything just in case you offend someone. Yeah. I don't think that's helpful.
I have this argument sometimes, Lisa, with journalists in London. When I might say something, if we sat having a drink, I'd say, oh, you can't say that. I say, well,
I want to know what would he have said there, because it's a very vague thing. Like, what would he have said? And also, I don't buy this. I think the idea, yeah, you could argue in some workplaces it's true, but it's obvious when you're joking. Sometimes it's not. If you are just being hateful, again, a lot of conservative humor is just hate, and I think that needs to be called out. But if you're saying something a bit ironic and self-deprecate, it all depends who's the target of the humor. If you're saying something about race, religion, ethnicity, gender, that's probably not that funny. But if you're saying something that's kind of about yourself, or about someone you work with, that's more, I think. Again, it's all about context, isn't it? Like, if you're just spouting stuff off about, oh, bloody immigrants coming over here, yeah, I'm sorry, you've got to go, because that's just hatred. So again, it all depends what is the joke and what's the context of what's being said.
well, you know what? If you get out in the real world, in real places, this is exactly what people are saying.
Yeah.
Wake up.
Yeah, there is this.
I just don't agree. Like, what does he mean here? What specifically is he talking about? I'd say, what do you mean? Give me an example of what people are saying, because I just don't agree. People aren't hateful day to day. They'll have jokes with them, but they're not talking about immigrants or trans people.
There's a brutal honesty in these places, and that's because of our history. And also, I suppose we trust each other a bit more as well. Because we know each other, or even if you don't know each other, you kind of know each other's background. So you can trust each other a bit more. You can perhaps push boundaries in these places. And I think you can be more honest. Yeah. Unfortunately, and I put this down to class and the class system, is the middle class don't get our humour. They don't understand that it's a bonding exercise, sort of, being a bit cruel to each other, laughing at each other. They don't understand that that's a bonding exercise, and instead they pull us up and pick us up on it.
They do, and one of the things, Andy, where I spoke about losing our culture and our identity sometimes.
I do agree with that to an extent, but that's a liberal centrist, neoliberal thing, a capitalist thing of virtue signaling towards like not offending people, and I agree that is a problem. But that's not coming from a socialist or leftist perspective. That's coming from a corporate virtue signaling. They don't care about actually trans people or black people or gay people. They're just doing it so they look good, so they don't get sued. That's it. They don't really care. So, yeah, I think there is a division, but also that middle class, are they not joking? I mean, I think that kind of difference between working class and middle class, like in terms of humor, I don't think it's that different. Yeah, you could argue people are a bit more feisty. Working class people, they've got it tough. They are more like to be a bit bawdy. But I think it depends on your experience and what your day to day job is, because there's plenty of middle class people who have dark humor, who have like have great sense of humor. So I'm not sure that division is so clear.
My youngest son, Harry, he went to university and he went away, obviously mixing with different people from all around the country. He's gone away 6 months and he come back and disaster had struck. He was a vegetarian. I mean, what is all that about?
I mean, I think it's a personal tragedy and a familial
It's a terrible
tragedy. I think it's awful, truly.
Oh God, someone choosing to have freedom and do what they want. See, this is the thing. When they talk about freedom, can't do anything you want to do these days without offending someone. He's offended by someone just not eating meat. I mean, how fragile do you have to be to have that position?
The first ever vegetarian in our family, by the way.
I know.
I mean,
We haven't got one of them.
Neither do we.
We don't have any of
But
them.
this is the thing, they go away to uni, they get their minds poisoned by all these lefties.
Eating
at
lettuce
uni.
when they come back.
Well,
it's
all sorts,
awful.
stuff like that, yeah, I mean, lentils. I mean, that's...
Lentils? Oh, God.
I know. Well,
But that's my point.
Oh, healthy food. Ooh.
I know I'm being a bit flippant, but they go away, they come back and they're different people.
I mean, for reference.
Yes, because they've learned and they've been educated. They've actually read books, engaged in critical thinking, analysis, evaluation, synthesis, these abstract ideas that mean you're able to break down what is truth, what is nonsense. And it's interesting because this guy, again, used to be working class. He's not anymore. But he likes to pretend he is just because he has an accent. That's not working class. It's what do you represent? Do you represent the workers? And that doesn't matter what colour they are either, be it the brown, whatever. If you're working class, you're working class. Ethnicity, race doesn't come into it because the socialist movement doesn't see borders. Working class isn't about borders. And this is why, ultimately, Lee Anderson hates the working class and is not working class. He's working against the interests of the working class. But, he doesn't want to talk about that. He doesn't want to talk about Thatcherism.
I don't think there is anything wrong with being a vegetarian. I know many working class vegetarians for many reasons.
can't they have a bit of way for the thin man?
Well, I think.
But we
The
don't.
royal family. Now, that's where I would agree with you. So when we start to think about our culture, so you think about what working class people now are on the telly. So, I'm thinking about the royal family, the big sitcoms of the past, where working class laughter was absolutely in there. We have disappeared now.
And we also know...
That's true, because all we have now is Gavin and Stacey, which is awful. I can't stand James Corden. So, yeah, I definitely agree with that point, because the royal family is genius. And it's from people who actually lived that experience, the working class experience. So, yeah, I completely agree. And also the fact that zero working class people work in the film industry. It's pretty much just middle class people. Also with acting as well. Most jobs, like lawyers, journalists, actors, screenwriters, filmmakers, it's really designated to the middle class because we have no social mobility in this country. In the past, you could work your way up, but now your socio-economic status is your fate. So if you're born into a working class, fairly poor family, that's where you will end up statistically. So that's the real conversation we need to be having about the UK. Where's social mobility? Where are the chances? Because that's why people are angry and upset. It's because the social contract doesn't exist anymore. You can't get on in life. You can, even in America, there's more social mobility. There's more of a chance for you to succeed. Not in the UK.
Now, Andy, getting some of the old comedies from the 70s, The Rising Damps, The Dad's Armies and stuff like that, we're getting disclaimers on the screen before this may offend somebody.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry. Offence is taken, not given.
Yeah, I think it's
ironic coming from Lee Anderson. It's offended by vegetarianism. Yeah, I mean, it's a corporate neoliberal virtue signal of trying not to offend people and, give an indication what is in the content of that program. And, that's the result of the fact that we can't challenge the status quo. We can't have real change. So we have to do, corporate virtue signaling, and has to do these little changes instead of doing real changes. So does he want radical change? No, Lee Anderson doesn't. So, what are you going to do?
It's ridiculous, and it's a way of trying to erase the past. I mean, sure, some of those jokes are somewhat insensitive, but that's what makes them funny. That's the point of the comedy.
To who, though?
Well, I think, looking at Fawlty Towers, there were some insensitive jokes. If I was
Have you ever watched a Carry On film?
once, yes.
One, is that it?
Carry on.
I'm not a big
Have you
fan.
seen this? Have you heard this? One.
I speak to the crowd. I speak to the crowd here.
Honestly.
Well, no, I can't sit down and watch films.
Carry On films.
They're too long. They're
What's
too
your
long.
favourite Carry On
God.
film?
Screaming.
Carry On Dick.
Carry
I
On
like that one, mate.
Screaming.
That's a good one.
Frying
But they're great,
tonight.
aren't they?
Yeah.
They're great. Full of innuendos, aren't they?
Yeah, they are, and I think you've got a point.
Yeah, but Carry On films are quite innocuous. I mean, yeah, there probably will be some racist jokes, but who's getting offended by that? It's very silly, double entendres, innuendos. I mean, it's a weird example.
Because, this again, I'm a working class academic and I look at this stuff because I think it's important. Working class people are not on public platforms anymore. You don't hear our humour, you don't hear our accents. We are, and if you do, we've been sort of silenced and quietened down, and this sort of general laughing and chit chat that we've had today, and really at your expense.
He's used to that.
And another place that we might be considered.
Yeah, but look
bullying
at
you.
this area, Andy, that we live in. We've got all the old miners' welfares, the working men clubs, got the Victoria Club up here, which is shut now, sadly, the welfare's. But on a Saturday night, you'd get a comedian in there, telling jokes to the miners, the factory workers.
And it would often be a miner who was then actually a comedian at night. I mean, you're not going to like this, but that's what Karl Marx said.
Yeah.
Karl Marx said that you could be a fisherman in the morning and an artist in the afternoon.
wrong with that.
And that's what we used to be here. We did used to be able to, do the hard work in the day and then at night be a musician or be a singer or a comedian.
See, I have to watch my language sometimes in Parliament.
Yeah, he doesn't want to talk about that. Exactly. I knew he wouldn't want to talk about that because it's true. The working class culture was a culture of autodidacts. They were self-educated. They were self-read, really well read. They'd read Shakespeare. The miners would be reading poetry down the mines. They were educated. And also, they were funny. They were folk singers. They they'd get together and sing together poetry, comedy, artistic endeavour. But that's gone. And that is because of Thatcherism. She killed working class culture across the UK. So it's interesting, ex-Tory here, he's not able to talk about it because what's he going to say? He's not going to admit that he's part of the problem, is he?
Because, I was a coal miner for many, many years at Sutton Colliery and then Welbeck Colliery, and I think, we used to talk to people underground, not in a nasty way, but in a banter. It's like a dark humour, I suppose.
Yeah.
The nearest thing now is probably the armed forces, where they can still probably get away with it.
Probably was quite nasty. Like these kind of male spaces often are full of ego and pride, and it does get nasty. Men can be really nasty and horrible. So I think in that way, things have probably got better, where, there's still banter, which is great and important for social cohesion in groups of men. But I think it's probably improved. Like, probably isn't as nasty and isn't as vitriolic and kind of toxic in terms of, people can't express their emotions, so they kind of take it out on other people. I think we've probably improved in that way. Why is he so resentful of the fact that in many ways we have moved forward?
Little bit of that. Yeah. But if you use that sort of language anywhere else, then they'd be cancelling you.
I'll tell you what.
Oh, God. He always has to bring it back to this, like, cancelling. It's like, can't he just have a discussion about the working class experience and not always bring it back to these, like, culture war talking points and trying to score political points? Like, we're talking about real people's lives and the fact that working class people aren't represented. They don't have a voice. They certainly don't have a voice with his fake populism that doesn't listen to working class people. They're telling the working class people what to be concerned about immigrants and trans people. Working class don't give a shit about immigrants. They're friends with immigrants. They don't give a shit about trans people. They are trans people. So this fake populism it's really getting tiresome now.
Tell you what, you should have been in the factories with the lasses then.
Well,
'Cause if you-
I've got my mother here. She in factories.
I
Some of
know,
the things-
because I tell you what, if you ever heard them women in the factory when I was young,
Listen, I used to see them women on Friday break up at Christmas in the Portland Arms.
I know, I was one of them.
I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did.
I saw what they got up to.
I know.
But I think just building on Lisa's point about working class people in television, the fact that us three are here, all working class people, sat talking.
Yeah, but we won't go to jump on the BBC.
sorry.
Well,
this is
No.
Lee Anderson is not working class. Unless he's a socialist, where socialist definition means all people who work working class. He's not a socialist, so he doesn't define himself as working class because he sees himself as probably got out of it in many ways. Yeah, he'll virtue signal towards the working class. Oh, he's working. He's not. He doesn't care about the working class people.
No,
you wouldn't get it on the Beeb, you wouldn't get it on ITV, you wouldn't get it on Sky. The fact we're sat here with working class people almost exclusively is something that's rare. You would have
very
seen
rare.
something like that
It's terrible, isn't it?
40 years ago.
You can't
but
get working
now
class
you can.
people on the BBC, but you
No.
can get paedophiles. You got Jimmy Savile.
Yeah.
You got dodgy.
You Edwards.
Well, not for a paedophile, but dodgy. Gary Glitter, he
Gary
made his
Glitter.
name on there. I mean, it's rife with this sort of behaviour. Yet normal working class people. Producer's going mad, by the way. He thinks he's going to cut this bit out, but he needs to leave it.
Doesn't
in.
represent the views of the
It is,
channel,
but
represent
by
personal views.
the way, disclaimer: the BBC aren't here to defend them. I am not bothered because I don't pay my licence. But guys, this is a serious thing, really.
I mean,
No, it is a serious.
Absolutely, it really is.
I know we're laughing, but actually, having no public representation
Yeah.
is a big issue. It's a major, and that can be in politics, but also culture as well. When working class people all over the country see this show, they will be laughing along wherever they're from.
It is ironic that even Labour has more working class people, like normal, so-called normal people, than Reform. Reform is full of, well, you have a turncoat, businessman Rupert Lowe, Richard Tice, Nigel Farage, all millionaires, privately educated, businessmen. Again, somehow these people represent the working class. How? Explain to me how.
And we're making a point, a serious point.
Yeah, and they'll be laughing along with us.
Yeah.
And it don't matter whether they're in Kent or whether they're, in Wales.
Yeah.
They will understand this humour.
Yeah, and we've got a Reform MP, an anarchist trade unionist. These are all working class values.
That sounds like a joke.
I know, yeah.
I'm sorry, they're not. Reform, UK are not working class values. I'm sorry, it's fake populism. Not true. The myth of right-wing populism somehow helping working people is completely false. Lee Anderson does not care about the working people. The policies of Reform UK do not help the working people. Farage praised Liz Truss's mini budget a couple of years ago that crushed the economy, increased mortgage prices, and added to the debt, killed the economy, and caused part of the cost of living crisis. What was this? Just cutting taxes for the wealthy. They do not care about the working people.
But on a serious note, a working class value isn't a left wing or a right thing. It's a
Oh my God, this is such a centrist non-point. No, I don't like this guy. Get him off. Boo.
class thing. And when we talk about diversity, it's often put down to gender or race, but socioeconomic diversity is never considered. And I think
Says you big words now.
now I'm with the academic. I'm bringing out the big word, but it is serious. We never have class diversity.
Lisa's.
I mean, that is true. We don't have any working class representation really in Parliament because Labour doesn't really, Reform doesn't, and the Tories don't. So it's so ironic that you have this fake right-wing populism, but who is actually being represented, the working class? We're not. As a people, immigrants, whatever your gender, race, sexuality, there's no representation of the working class. That's the real problem we face now.
Been a working class lady. I've been a working class bloke. Well, whatever. And
Cheers for solidarity.
but I know from working underground that the men I work with did an incredibly difficult job in difficult circumstances, hard work. I've got some ex-miners in here. My mate Andy's in there. He did 35 years down the pit. But they, these were socially conservative people. They loved Queen and country. They would sing the national anthem. They respected law and order. They wanted their kids to do well.
See, he's trying to rewrite history there. And obviously there would have been some socially conservative. But most of the people who worked down in the pits, they were socialists. They were radicals. They were communists. Like the Communist Party was massive in England and Wales, Scotland throughout the 20th century. So he's kind of rewrite history like, oh, they were all no, they were radical. They read their Karl Marx. They read their George Orwell. They were very much against the capitalist system. They like class consciousness was very much a present thing. So,
They're aspirational, wanted the kids to go to a good school. They believed in hard work pays. These are socially conservative
Yeah.
values.
no, they knew they were being fucked over by the people who owned the mines. God, like Lee Anderson, such a liar. He doesn't care about it. Just again, he doesn't care about the working people.
Andy, and something that, you know, regardless of what class you're from, these are tremendous values.
Yeah, and I would say that we do share a lot of those values with other working class people around the country and working class people who have got immigrant backgrounds as well, because some of we've got the same sort of values.
Yeah, but Lee Anderson would never talk about that. He doesn't want to, because to him, it's us versus them. They're separate. They've got different values to us. And he would say that. He'd say, oh, they don't share our values. Often they do. Like, they do. Often, ironically, Muslims, people who come from different countries, often are more conservative and love Queen and Country, or King and Country, more than often the native population. So, again, simply not true what he's saying.
Teach a lot of South Asian people at the university, and they've got very similar values to what I grew up with about
true.
family,
Yeah, family, yeah.
you know, about family, community. So I would say that our values are still there. Whether they're represented on a big stage or not is a different thing. And I think we should have a campaign about getting working class
I agree.
people.
Andy, what's the best thing about this area?
You agree, but will he have it in the Reform UK policy? Will they talk about working class representation and visibility in media and jobs and actually creating social mobility? No, they won't. No, they will not do that because they don't care. Fake right-wing populism.
Yeah.
I think it's the community.
So why do you live in London then?
Well, the reason is because Thatcher stripped all the jobs.
Okay, so you've done a runner. Lisa?
Well, it's true.
What's the best
It's true.
See, you just can't talk about Thatcherism. They can't talk about what destroyed this country and why we're in this mess, because the homes have not been, rebuilt from when she sold them off, the stocks. What jobs, what economy do we have outside of London? Nothing. Been decimated. These towns. But again, he can't confront this because he's part of the problem. He doesn't care about these towns. Only when it's convenient to demonise immigrants and say they're the problem. Not the people in power, not Thatcher and neoliberalism. All about the immigrants.
True.
Yeah.
About this area. Do you know what? I like it.
You're still blaming Thatcher 40 years on, by the way.
Well, I am and all.
Yeah,
but
because that legacy is still there. 40 years on. We are still dealing with Thatcherism and neoliberalism and the massive inequality of privatisation. The fact that our water's privatised. The only country in the world stupid enough, England, not Wales, England, to privatise water to the point where sewage, millions of litres of sewage have been pumped into our water supplies. They're in massive debt, but they're paying millions of pounds of dividends to the shareholders. And what do we pay? We have to pay more water prices for a basic, I think, commodity that shouldn't even be a question of profit. It shouldn't even be a question. It needs to be nationalised. But Lee Anderson, Reform, they don't want to talk about it because that goes against their interest of consolidating capital, massaging the wealthy people's, ball bags. They don't care. Again, pretending to care about the working class when they don't.
I think most of these people.
Do you know what
don't.
I like about us? I like our history.
Yeah.
I like our very, very complicated but fascinating history. I like our countryside is sort of been industrialised and now it's countryside
It
again.
is, yeah. We've got deer now on Bali and badgers and foxes.
I know.
Guys, great discussion once again. Andy, always a pleasure. Lisa, a pleasure.
So there you go. Fake populism. The right-wing Reform fake populism, pretending to care about the working class, pretending to care about raising their living standards, which they have no policies of. They don't care. Oh, they're going to raise taxes to £20,000. I'm sorry, where's that money coming from? Just uncosted spending that really doesn't tackle the heart of the problems facing working class people. Low wage jobs. The fact that often people are having to be subsidized by tax credits, universal credit, housing benefits. They don't want to change the status quo. They want to keep it as it is. So if you like the video, watch this video here or here, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.